welcome to the Soulful Badass podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Jackson, an intuitive success coach from the UK, and I'm here to help entrepreneurs, leaders, and soul-aligned goddesses to create epic levels of success and impact in your life and your business. So if that sounds good to you, make sure you are tuning in every week for mindset talk, manifestation, magic, and incredible interviews with other soul-aligned entrepreneurs. So hit the subscribe button, and I'd love to invite you to come and join the Soulful Badass community. All the links are in the show notes. Please go and click them, and I'll see you in there. Hi everyone, welcome to this week's podcast. This week I am joined by my special guest, Larry Davids. Larry is a psychic medium, and I'll let him introduce himself. But Larry, you take over. You're going to do it so much better than I could.
Well, thank you, Rachel. Thank you for inviting me to your wonderful show today. And thank you for all the listeners and viewers watching as well and listening on replay and live. So primarily, I'm a psychic and a medium. So I always like to clarify or elaborate what is a psychic and what is a medium, because many people, they're not really too sure the distinction between the two. So psychic just reads somebody's energy field, their aura. They tune in to where they're at and guide and give them guidance in any way they can. And mediumship is connecting with a loved one from the spirit world, somebody who has transitioned back to the spirit world. So briefly, that's the difference between a psychic and a medium. And I'm also a spiritual teacher. So I teach my spiritual classes online, developing your intuitive abilities, your mediumship. And also I do coaching, and I call it alignment coaching, because I combine my intuitive ability so I can help or attempt to help people to align their frequencies and their vibration. Because many people who come to me and to you, they're not really happy in their lives. They're stuck. It is because they've become out of alignment, as it were. Yeah. And I feel like our jobs is to tune in and then see how can we realign them so then their soul feels happy again. It feels uplifted. Because as you know, when you truly follow your soul, it's easier said than done, as you know, because when we get stuck in the rut, for example, do a job because we think, oh, I have to make money, I have to be financially responsible. And somebody might say, well, what are you doing that work? You know, you're really good at, say, cooking, for example. Why don't you become some kind of chef or open up your own restaurant? And people would say, oh, Rachel, you're mad. You don't think I could ever do that? I have financial responsibilities. So unfortunately, we haven't been educated to listen to us. So we've been educated from a young child to memorize information at school. And if we do that, then a teacher, of course, congratulates you and says, oh, well done, Rachel, you got 9 out of 10 or whatever they say. But we're never told, you know, we're actually spiritual beings having a physical existence. We're actually all intuitive, but we don't know that unless we make an effort as an adult and read books or do workshops or study with persons as well.
Yeah, and I love that you explained the difference between a psychic and a medium as well, because I think that is a concept that people struggle to get their head around often. I've noticed that a few people with the intuitive ability to become a medium, Larry, have often been a bit more fearful about that area. Was that the same for you when you started developing your gifts?
No. From a young child, I was always aware of something around me. Like I was pretty much a solitary child. I didn't really feel the need to play with other children, even though I did. I was always content staying in my room at home, playing with my toys. And eventually when I got my guitar when I was a teenager, it's like I became obsessed with it. I was so drawn to music. I don't know why. It was like, I don't know if it's like a drug, but you know, when you find something in life and you're just so, people think you become obsessed, but you're so magnetized by it. Yeah. And I was always aware of different energy. I would hear things. And as a teenager, I started seeing people's auras as well. And I would see leprechauns as well. For example, it could be a bright sunny day. I'd be playing my guitar in the back garden when I was a teenager. And I'd see 3 leprechauns all in white misty people right in front of me. And they were always running. And it was the same at night. Sometimes I'd see them at night as I was going upstairs. My sister was sleeping. And I'd see a white misty person go right through the door. And when you see something like that, you don't expect to see that. And you think, how did he do that? And of course, I'd open up the door to see if I could find them in my sister's room. Yeah. And my mom would like yell at me saying, what are you doing waking your sister up? She's supposed to be sleeping. And
Oh, poor Natalie.
fortunately, because nobody in the family was spiritually open at the time,
Yeah.
you can't just say to your mother or father or anyone else, "Do you know, I just saw this white little misty," I didn't know they were called leprechauns in those days,
Mm.
"white misty person. They think you're mad. Don't be so silly." Or, "You're using your imagination too much," or something. They just shut you down. But I always saw them right into my 20s. And then I started seeing spirit. And there's something called objective seeing, which means you see physically something with your eyes. Like I can clearly see. Subjective seeing is you use your imagination, you see it within your mind. For example, if I say to you, "Okay, Rachel, I'd like you to visualize an orange." You're not going to spell the word out orange. You'll actually quickly see it. Your subconscious mind creates a picture. That's subjective seeing. We see it within. But when I started seeing spirit objectively with my physical eyes, it takes me aback. I think, "Ooh, what's that?" It wasn't scary. It's just like, where did that come from? And it's as if they were just looking at me. So I wasn't one of those mediums who saw spirit from the age of 4 at the end of their bed, or
Yeah.
their grandparents came in and then started giving them messages. I just saw things. And so when I was a teenager, luckily my mom used to bring home from the library books on mediums and psychics, and books about Indian gurus who would talk about energy, vibration, the purpose of the
Wow.
soul. And I guess you could say that was my early formative training through her, because I don't know why as well. I was drawn to the book she was reading. So I used to read her books and think, good grief, it just seems so fascinating, all that stuff. So without realizing it, maybe my soul was pulling me towards those kind of books to try and awaken me in this lifetime to realize this was the destiny or the destination I was supposed to be going on eventually.
Yeah. So does your mum have the abilities as well? Was she drawn to all of that?
Yeah, she lives in heaven now, but I remember she had a couple of experiences that were very vivid for her. For example, when my father passed away, she would say, "Oh, I saw your father. He went through the TV in our front room and he went straight to the bedroom." Or sometimes she would say, "Do you know, I woke up this morning and your father was just sitting at the end of my bed looking at me." And I said, "Well, what did he say?" "Nothing. He was just looking at me."
Oh,
Because when we see spirit, most of us don't say, "Oh, how's it going?" It always takes you by surprise. So
yeah.
like me and like my mom, she would see it, "Oh, it takes you by surprise." And also, once she was on a meditation retreat, studying transcendental meditation, and she was just resting in the afternoon in her room in the afternoon. And at the end of her bed, she just saw her grandmother show up. And she said it was as real as it could be. I could really see her with my physical eyes. And I said, "Well, did she say anything?" She said, "Yeah, she was holding up my clothes on my chair saying, 'Oh my gosh, today's fashion is terrible. The way you live, blah, blah, blah.'" She said she was critiquing everything I was wearing and doing. And I said, "How long did that so-called vision last for?" And she said, "It must have been only a few minutes, but it felt like a very long time, because when something's real and you're interacting with it, it does feel a lot longer than maybe it actually happened."
Yeah. So were you
So
able to have that relationship where you were quite open with your mum, or did you hide it during those earlier years?
yeah, I was very lucky. Like we'd get books from the libraries about remote viewing, astral traveling, because in those days there wasn't that many books, but there was paperback books. We'd take whatever we could find at the library. We'd practice at home. I'd lie in the bed and she would read out the script in the book. And also later on in my 20s as well, I started practicing something with her called psychometry, where you take an object, whether it's a picture or an object like a watch or piece of jewelry, you close your eyes. Well, I close my eyes and you tune in and see what kind of information comes up. And I was picking up all this information about her relatives that I had no idea about. And after it all, because she would write everything down, she'd say, "This is amazing. You've no idea. You just described this. You described that. The imagery, the information you get. This is amazing." She used to say, "You should do this full time." But in my 20s, I was obsessed with music. I didn't really want to do that full time. I was always like, no, no, my mission in life is to be a full-time musician, which eventually I did achieve. But it's funny how you'll do something and then maybe I got sidetracked by my music, as it were. And eventually circumstances led me back to doing this kind of work. And here I am doing this full time, which is kind of funny in a way.
Yeah, because you had a really successful musical career, didn't you? So share a bit about that, because it does sound amazing.
Well, we could say with the music career, this was the beginning of me implementing LOA, law of attraction, without knowing that it had existed in those days. Because ever since I was a young child, I wanted to be a drummer. So I used to have two pencils in my hand. I was always drumming patterns on the table, driving everyone nuts. And when I used to ask my parents for a drum kit, they'd say, "Oh no, a drum kit, that's way too loud." So I'd say, "How about a saxophone?" Because I used to love the sound of alto saxophone, like from Dave Brubeck. His sax player was an alto sax. "Oh no, no, that's too expensive, too loud." So eventually I got a guitar for Christmas. And when I did, that was it. I became obsessed with it. And in my day, there wasn't like what there is now, a plethora of information. There was no YouTube, internet. I went to the library, found this only one guitar book that said play guitar in a day, which was, of course, a lie because there's no way you can play guitar in a day. But the title, and then the songs were terrible. It was songs like On Top of Old Smoky, because on the title it said learn to play like your favorite guitar player. And I thought, oh, that sounds good. But of course, who wants to learn On Top of Old Smoky and Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star when you're a teenager?
Yeah, they start you off good, don't they?
Yeah. So luckily, I started training myself. I'd buy my favorite albums, and in those days, and I still am, I was like really obsessed by the Beatles. So every time I'd get my monthly paycheck when I used to work in the supermarket as a teenager, I'd go to the shops and I'd buy a Beatle record or any other record, David Bowie or whatever was out in those days, the greatest hits of so and so. And I'd spend hours driving my mother nuts and everyone nuts, playing the same song over and over, trying to work out the chord progression. But inside, I always felt and knew I should be a musician. And without realizing it, I was applying the principles of LOA, law of attraction, in that I felt it. I really felt I would be a successful musician. I saw it. People told me I was mad. There's no way you can make money being a musician, all these kind of negative statements. But luckily, somehow I believed in my vision, in my dream. And I did eventually become a successful musician. It didn't happen overnight. I'd say it happened, maybe 10, 12, 15 years after, from being a teenager, always staying focused, even though initially I had what's called normal jobs like retail jobs or office work. That vision, that vision, that strong vision, that feeling, it just never went away. And I used to think, how come I'm still feeling drawn, even though it seems like I'll never be a musician? But eventually, as you know, when you stay focused on your vision, you're actually putting that thought, those desires in your energy field, your auric field. And eventually it's just a matter of time before people and opportunities come in your life that gradually, bit by bit, lead you into that direction that you really want to go into. So, of course, when you do become successful, oh, you're so lucky. He's so fluky. Look at that. If it wasn't for this, he never would have done this. But it's not being lucky, as you know, is when we stay focused on what is it we truly want. Like planting a seed, an experienced farmer will plant that seed. And there's something called a gestation period, meaning it takes time. We cannot predict exactly how long is it going to take for that seed to grow up, to start sprouting. Nobody knows exactly. A seed grows in its own time frame. So it's the same with our desires, our thought forms. They all take time. We cannot guarantee, well, if you focus on this and visualize this, I can guarantee you within a month, you'll be a famous whatever you'd like to be. It doesn't work that way, as you know. And in a way, we could say that's the beauty and the challenge of life is like, well, let's see how much tenacity or consistency, perseverance I have to really allow myself to say, focus on my desires, despite what I'm seeing in my current outside world.
Yeah. And it's all about putting it into your energy field. Like you said, you put it out into your auric field, and that's what generates that momentum. But with something like playing the guitar, I imagine you'll have been doing that regular and allowing yourself to just escape into that feeling of really being there and being present in that moment, which will have shut out a lot of noise that we we have in normal life. But
yeah, you're absolutely right, Rachel. I used to come home from school. Instead of doing my homework, I'd go upstairs to my room, my bedroom, get my guitar out, put on my favorite songs I was trying to learn at the time. And I'd just stand there pretending I was playing in front of thousands of people, playing out in front of sold out gigs, even though it's just me by myself playing in the bedroom and not even being that good, trying to improve my guitar playing and trying to learn a song. But eventually, without realizing it, as I say, I was actually practicing the principles of LOA, law of attraction, learning to believe and fortifying that impression, those feelings, those desires.
Yeah, that is so much good advice for anybody looking to manifest or use law of attraction in whatever dreams they have, because it's not about just having that dream and then not acting on it. Even though you weren't pursuing it in a certain way, having that daily practice, that daily time where you just sink into that dream is so important. Even, and like you said, it doesn't matter what's going on around you. You were playing to a stadium full of people and you were there in your bedroom, and it's having that imagination and having that energy to just, sink into the feeling of it without worrying about the how, in a sense.
That's right. In one way, I could say, because I was so naive and knew nothing about LOA, I just totally believed in my dreams. Everyone told. I remember at school, forget what they call the person who interviews you when you're in high school. So, what would you like to do? Career officer.
Yeah.
And first thing I said, oh, I'd like to be a musician. No. Let's be realistic. She used to say, have you considered being a teacher, a dentist, a lawyer, an accountant, and everything? She said, I said, nah, that's too boring for me. And she rang up my mum once saying, your son's giving me a lot of problems. I think he needs to see a doctor or something. Every week I see him, he changes his mind on what he wants to do. And because I'd always say musician first, and she'd say no. So then she'd say something like, how about translator? You seem to be quite good at languages. And then the next week I said, nah, changed my mind.
They're not sticking.
Yeah.
Imagine if you'd have said psychic medium.
Yeah, that would have been really funny. They said, oh, now he's really delusional.
So you had some amazing success as a musician, and I was reading your bio, Larry. So you composed music for SpongeBob SquarePants, Sesame Street, so other films and TV shows as well, but real epic success as a musician. How did you then take that transition from being a musician into going full-time in your business?
Well, luckily, I don't know if it's luckily, when I was a full-time musician, I was still reading any book I could find on psychic, mediumship, law of attraction. For example, the first book I think I read on law of attraction was by Shakti Gawain, and it was all about visualization. It's considered a classic now. And it's a hard book to read because the print's so small, but I don't know how I managed it, but I did read through the whole book, and it was all about visualizing your desires. So I thought, gosh, I've been doing that for years with my music. I thought, I didn't know that was an actual technique to visualize things. And then eventually I read the Louise Hay's classic book, How to Heal Yourself. And again, it was all about visualizing. And of course, then she introduced the concept of affirmations, which in those days I didn't know about affirmations, and a lot of things that is now more widely known that she discusses, like mirror work, affirmations, using imagination, dealing with limited paradigms, which is self-beliefs that deter us from moving forward. For example, if we had an emotional experience that makes us feel like, oh, I tried that once. For example, when children learn to ride a bike, nobody learns to ride a bike in one day. All children, including myself, you have accidents, you fall over.
Yeah.
And then the next day when the parents say, oh, would you like to try and ride your bike again? I don't think there's any child that would say, no, I tried that yesterday, it didn't work. That's what an adult would say. But children still have that enthusiasm. I remember I had all these Band-Aids on my knee, cuts everywhere from falling over. And I didn't say, nope, I tried that yesterday. It's not for me. I couldn't wait to get back on the bike.
Yeah.
I was and I think that's the sad thing as adults. We lose that inner enthusiasm, that inner belief, thinking, well, success doesn't come overnight, really. It's by having these stepping stones. Well, that didn't quite work. Let's see if I can do it a bit different today. Yeah. Our inner dialogue is not really well trained, as you know, we're not really told, educated. Well, that's okay. Let's see if we can try it this day. And this is why athletes are lucky, because they have coaches who always propel them and guide them to propel them in their so-called athletic career. But most of us don't have a coach. And for those who do take the time and spend the time and money to actually work with a coach that they resonate with, they will definitely see their lives change and unfold for the better.
Yeah, definitely. So how did that then transpire from reading about it and learning more to actually taking the leap and moving across to that business?
Well, again, luckily, as a full-time musician, I was always working, giving readings with people on the side, because I was always, I don't know why, something told me you got to keep practicing. And so it's not that I was trying to do it full time. It was like an adventure. Let me see if I can read this person. And in the early days, I used to use playing cards, which I learned from my mom as well. She used to use a pack of normal playing cards, and she would so I learned from her just by being there and watching. And then I started practicing that as well. So I was always practicing giving readings without realizing it. That's something one actually has to do, is to practice.
Yeah.
And then, of course, any book I could find about spiritual development or law of attraction, I would just read, absorb, digest, practice the concepts. And then eventually I studied Reiki. And I'll never forget when I first learned my Reiki level on 1 and 2, where you can be a practitioner. The woman who taught me Reiki, she owned a crystal shop. And she said to me, do you know, you're very gifted for this. I'd like you to run my shop while I go and work at this psychic fair. You don't think I said, sure, no problem. Oh my gosh, I totally panicked. And I think, well, she must be mad. I'm not going to work in a crystal shop. I was so scared. I did it. And, when you haven't done something, those limited paradigms will kick in immediately saying, who do you think you are? You're not that good. And then you think, what if a client yells at me or they think I'm not the real thing? The imposter syndrome kicks in. Yeah. But I did work in a crystal shop. I did the Reiki there. And all the clients said they really enjoyed it. And when my so-called boss came back, she said, wow, I've heard wonderful things about you. How about if you keep working in my shop, part-time?
Wow. Yeah.
And so I thought, wow, who would have thought? And I've always been interested in sound healing. So along the years, I would try and learn things about sound healing. And it wasn't until many moons later, you could say, where once I got my music career out the way, I finally signed up with the College of Sound Healing here in the UK and became an accredited sound healer and a sound healing teacher, where you learn everything about how to use the voice, Tibetan bells, those crystal bowls, Himalayan bowls, the gongs, and the tuning forks. And then when the pandemic came along with lockdown, I realized, gosh, all these tools I have, I can't go around giving sound healing anymore because one, you need to transport them and it's loud. So I found a teacher who specialized only in tuning forks. And then, so even to this day now, I just give sound healing using tuning forks because the portable, I can travel anywhere in the world, for example, or I can travel to people's homes. They're light, but they're highly effective because, as you know, everything's energy, everything is frequency. So the tuning forks, they're releasing, unblocking your chakras. It's a bit like if you got a dirty window in front of you, most people will walk by because they become accustomed to seeing that dirty window in front of them. But if somebody says, Rachel, have you ever considered cleaning that dirty window? The normal person would say, oh, no, it's all right. Just leave it as it is because we become conditioned. But if somebody cleans it, good grief, I never knew there was a tree outside that window. They start seeing things they'd never seen before. So we could say that's like a metaphor for like realigning ourselves, learning to think differently, which in turn allows us to start taking different action as well.
Yeah. So amazing. So you did the sound healing, and then, I mean, we've had a conversation about the big dream and where this is going, which is happening after you've used law of attraction for everything else. But tell people more around what you've been working on, what's coming next, what's happening in that space.
Yeah. So I used to teach at Southampton University part-time 2 or 3 days a week. And the rest of the week, I would do my so-called spiritual work, giving readings, healings, teaching people to be a psychic and a medium. And on July the 31st, 2018, they blamed Brexit and laid everyone off, all the music lecturers. And I heard this big voice in my left ear saying, your teaching day's over, you need to focus on your spiritual career. Well, you don't think I jumped up and down with joy going, this is brilliant. Right away, this other voice said to me, my limited paradigms, of course, don't be so stupid. You have to be financially responsible. You better hurry up and find another teaching job. There's no way you'll be able to make a living being a full-time spiritual person. That's only good for the so-called celebrity people. Well, within the first week of August, the College of Psychic Studies contacted me saying, we'd like to offer you a position here. Now, again, I didn't jump up and down with joy. If I knew you in those days, Rachel, I would have said, you won't believe it. I got this message from the College of Psychic Studies. And right away, that limited paradigm came in saying, don't be so silly. They're just trying to get your money. They don't need another psychic medium. Think how many they got there. So you can see how quickly those limited paradigms kick in all the time. And I think I waited a week or two before I finally replied back saying, okay. So it's funny how even if you have all this so-called knowledge, it doesn't mean we're perfect beings and we know how to implement it immediately. There's always a learning curve, or you could say maybe it's as if the universe tests us. Okay, if you have this amount of knowledge, just see if you're really ready to apply it immediately to allow your life to reach that next notch, as it were.
Yeah. I love how you describe the limited paradigm that kicks in, because I always talk about the ego. And as soon as you have a bright idea from your intuition, it takes a matter of seconds before your ego will kick in with a counter. And I think that's why it's so difficult for people to follow that aligned path, because you get an initial buzz and and then it's quickly smacked down by the limitations we have. And unfortunately, the limitations shout that bit louder, that it takes that level of trust to go, actually, that first bit of excitement, that's the path that needs to be going on. And it might be crazy, but it works.
Yeah. And as you say, Rachel, the challenge as human beings is to stay in that energy, that vibration, that frequency, that enthusiasm, that excitement that first came to us. Because the way I like to see it, our brain generates thoughts. And because the brain is a physical organ, that thought will be there until we deal with it, process it, whatever. But an inspirational thought, it comes, as you know, it's a very high vibration, it's a high frequency. This physical body, because we live in a third dimension, is not designed to sustain the whole high vibration for a long time. So if we don't write down that inspiration, that idea we get, we might say at first, oh, that's a good idea, and do nothing with it. An hour can go by, and we might say to ourselves, do you know, had this brilliant idea for whatever, it could be a book, an idea, something. And then we say, I just can't remember what the heck it was. Well, that's because that inspirational idea, that impression is such a high vibration, it excites you. And the reason it excites you is because it's what your soul is trying to be guided, propelled to move forward with these impressions of ideas that what we're supposed to be doing. Each one of us are a creator, because in life, we have what's called consumers and creator. Consumer is somebody who allows the outside world, their outside circumstances, to influence them, to not make them feel like, well, I know the news says this or somebody told me that, but I know I can do this. A creator is somebody who doesn't allow themselves to be influenced by circumstances. They stay focused within that inner vision. Well, that didn't work, but I know I'm going to achieve this, or I know I'll get there. Yeah. So again, it's easy to be told that or to read that in a book. But the challenge is, as a human being, when something doesn't quite happen the way you expect it to happen, are you going to allow yourself to keep being that creator, or you're going to allow yourself to succumb to being a consumer and say, oh, well, it didn't work. I tried it. Never mind.
Yeah. And the trick is to move from the consumer to the creator, which we're taught to be consumers from a young age, but actually to have the ability to go, something feels a bit off inside, and I'm going to follow that and see where that goes. That's the type of people I interview for the podcast, because I want to showcase how many different ways you can do that. And I think the way that you've described that is just perfect. So anybody listening feeling like they've been a consumer all your life, you can change to that creative vibration as well. And that's what I definitely did.
Yeah. And as you know, Rachel, once you do achieve your outcome, your desire, then nobody says to you, do you know, Rachel, that's really good. I can see you've been applying the LOA principles. They say, Rachel, how did you get that? Oh, Rachel, you're so lucky. I wish I could have what you have. But nobody gives us credit for saying, yeah, I stayed focused on my vision. I've been using the tools that, you know, even Buddha and Jesus, people like that, they've been teaching these so-called LOA principles from the beginning of time. So this information is not new. Our perspective is new. For example, in Jesus' time, there were a lot of fishing stories, or people were fishing. That was basically sounds like a job. These days, if you said to me and gave me fishing stories, I'd say, gee, Rachel, you know, that's a great story, but fishing, I don't really understand what you mean by fishing. Yeah. Because we're in 2023, if you gave me a story that's more relatable to the way we're living life today, I say, oh, that's a good idea, Rachel. I never thought of that. Why don't I try that? So the thing that's only different, I feel, is that the perspective of this information is changing and evolving along the way, which it should. But the actual substance of the content, the actual seed of it all, is actually the same thing, because everything in life is just energy. If we simplify it to that little formula, everything's energy.
Yeah. And it's so true, isn't it? It's just that we have been hearing about these techniques and ways of being for so long. They've just been hidden or potentially masked by that change in society. But if somebody said, this is the way to get 1 million TikTok hits, suddenly it's a different ball game that people are talking about now. But it's always been there in the essence of what we've been taught. It's just whether you've got that ability to put the dots together and see it as that's the map of how things work. So,
and it's great to have people like yourself, Rachel, out there doing this work, because many people think they put these people who are very successful on a pedestal, saying, well, it's all right for them, they were born to do that, or they were chosen, or they got lucky. Where if people like me and you who've had what's called, quote, a normal day life, struggles, ebbs and flows, obstacles, good and bad things happen, we didn't give up. We allowed ourselves, no matter. It's like the weather keeps changing. Well, if it's sunny in the morning and it turns to unexpected heavy rain in the afternoon, we're not going to stop living our life. We're just going to think, oh, it's a good job I brought that umbrella with me, or my raincoat, whatever. We deal with the weather as it changes. And life, I find, is like the weather. It's never 100% predictable. It's always fluctuating. So we have to learn to deal with it, which is learning the mind. Einstein said your greatest tool is your imagination. And I never knew what he meant in the early days when I read that. But as time goes by and you learn more and you apply more and you experience more, you start understanding what these so-called great achievers actually meant when someone like Einstein says, your imagination is your greatest tool. It is. It's amazing.
Yeah. And it's the thing that sets us apart from all the other animals, beings. That's our magic. And yet we don't use it. Or we definitely in society, it's downplayed that don't be in the clouds, get your head out the clouds type of energy. Whereas what we do and what we teach people in a sense is let's get a little bit delusional in what you're thinking so that you can actually create the life that you want. And while you were playing your guitar in your bedroom, I imagine, you'll have thought, am I being delusional? And then just got back into it and thought, no, not at all. So it works.
Yeah. So everything I've achieved in life, and I'm sure you're the same, it all started with a thought form, a desire, feeling, and learning to override those negative thoughts that will come into play all the time, those limited beliefs, limited paradigms, which are easy to come in all the time. But I don't know if I'm lucky or I've had this ability to stay focused on what I truly want to manifest or achieve, even though at times you fall right flat on your face. For example, in 2006, I think it was, when I was teaching at a university, a piano fell on top of me.
Wow.
And I had what's called an out-of-body experience. And I didn't realize I was having that. It wasn't until I realized I saw myself floating. I saw everyone around me. I saw the room of the classroom of the university. And when the firemen showed up, they had these huge pair of scissors. They were ripping up my trousers. And I said to them from the so-called spirit world, I said, I was making a joke. I charge extra for that. And nobody was laughing at my joke. And I thought, that's funny. Nobody's laughing at my joke. What's wrong with them? And then that's when I realized I was in this void. It was all blackness around me. And I was just watching everything, like being the observer. But I felt amazing because I was no longer in my physical body. I was outside my physical body. And it wasn't until they put this face mask, which is like an oxygen mask, that they were trying to revive me back to consciousness. It's as if I was like sucked in or brought back into the physical body. And as soon as I was like, I felt all that dreadful pain. I was like, oh no.
I'm back.
Yeah. But that was such an interesting experience because, you can read books about what it's like to be outside the body. But until you experience something, it's like, gosh, it's such an amazing feeling. It's a bit like you go on holiday to somewhere you've always wanted to go and you finally get there and you go, wow, I've been dreaming about this for years. Look at this. This is amazing. And that's what it was like having the out of body experience. Not that I wanted to experience that. It's just once you're there, my mind was racing through all the stuff I'd read through books like, where's all these angels? Where's the tunnel of white light? What's going on?
Do you feel that heightened your experience then and your connection?
Well, that's what some people say. But I don't think so. I think it just made me more aware of the sensitivity of life, that there is no need to fear the transition from physical to non-physical life, that there's more than meets the eye. It's as if there was this amazing awareness that is out there that we just can't see because in a way we have limited vision with our so-called eyes, our physical eyes. It's a bit, they say dogs can hear sounds that the human ear cannot even detect. Well, why is that? Well, it's because our physical ear is built differently to a dog's ear. So, and it's like that with the physical organism, the physical body, it's a very dense vibration. And your non-physical body, it's a very high vibration. And that's why when I was outside the body, I didn't feel any pain. I just felt contentment, joy. I just felt like, wow, it just felt amazing.
Yeah. Wow. As part of the work that you do, Larry, what's it like when people experience readings from you? What's it look like in a sense?
Well, for example, I had one woman, very sad story for her. She lost her son. He committed suicide. So, of course, when I gave her the reading, I didn't say to have your son, he committed suicide. That's a bit harsh. She just said, oh, I'm really hoping you could bring in my son. And that's when I tune in and I said, well, you'd understand that your son did not finish his entire lifespan because you have to be diplomatic, of course. She says, yeah, I can understand why you're saying that. And I said, I'm really drawn to the throat area, that there must have been something wrong with the throat. That's what took his life away. She goes, you're absolutely right. He hung himself. So you see, you have to be very diplomatic. And then, of course, I described his personality. I had names and dates. So for her, it brought her a great comfort of healing. She said at the end, you don't know how much joy you've given me or how much healing this has given me. Because to us, we're not emotionally connected to their loved ones. But for them, of course, imagine having a child and your child takes their own life and he was a mature man as well. It must be very hard, no matter how old one is, to accept the loss unless you have this knowledge and you understand that life continues. Then it makes the transition or the so-called accident a bit easier to bear, even though it will still be sad, because anytime we lose anyone, a loved one, a pet, somebody who doesn't have a pet, and let's say you say to someone, oh, my pet dog just passed away, I'm really sad. Somebody who's never had a pet will say, well, I don't know what you're so upset about. Why don't you just buy another dog? Because they don't have that empathy, that sensitivity, what it's like to be emotionally connected to someone else, whether it's a pet, another loved one, you see? And people who want psychic readings, which is just guidance in their lives, they're so happy as well because they say, some of them will say, you've confirmed what I've been wondering, what I've been feeling, what I've been thinking about. So, and others, like they look into the guidance that comes into their lives and realize, you're right. I am in the wrong job. Why didn't I know this? Or why didn't somebody tell me? So every reading or person that comes in for a session, whether it's psychic or mediumship, they seem to leave with some kind of like, I don't know, it's like a mask has been unveiled for them and they can clearly see better or believe in themselves better. And when it comes to coaching like yourself, it's more about guiding people. And for myself, and like you do as well, Rachel, tuning in and really feeling and trusting the impressions that come to you to allow that person to be guided. And again, most people don't say, oh, thanks, Rachel, that was amazing. It takes time because it's scary to leave your comfort zone, to do something maybe you've never actually done. Maybe you've thought about it, but to think and take inspired action, as you know, are two different things altogether.
Yeah. And I think that's the difference. So, a lot of people sometimes think of work that psychics do is a bit more fortune teller, and they're going to tell them all the things that are going to map out in your life. And I'm loving that there's more psychics coming forward who are genuinely talking about the changes within people and how that impacts the decisions and the things that are going to turn their life around in their control, rather than it being, I see you marrying with 3 kids and doing all of that. It's a bit more, it is really connecting with that soul level and giving them that guidance that the soul needs to get across to them, which has been trying, but without, them really listening or hearing it properly.
Yeah, I think a good psychic should be honest and say, I cannot predict the future or guarantee the future. I can only tell you your potential, because we all have potential to change, to do other things. But again, we haven't been given the education, the guidance, the permission to tune into our potential, to listen to that inner guidance that we all have, because intuition is like a muscle. We're all intuitive beings. But again, if we're not made aware of it, our intuition level stays at a very low level. So when we start working with it, developing it, trusting it, which again is easier said than done, bit by bit, that intuitive muscle becomes more, it unfolds, it becomes developed at a higher level. We trust it more, we work with it more, and then we manage to magnify things, attract things a lot faster, and actual specific things we want, not like, oh, I finally manifested the love of my life. Unfortunately, they're married, they're drug addict, alcoholic, they're gambler. Well, that's because we didn't like be too specific on what kind of quality. It's no good saying you want something, as you know, we need to be a little bit more specific. Like it would be like me saying, oh, I'd love to be a full-time musician. And then I end up playing in bands that are like, I don't know, drug addicts, alcoholics, unreliable, never pay me. And then I'd say, gosh, that's not what I wanted. Well, yeah, it's because I didn't be specific enough. What kind of musician do I want? What kind of musical life, career would I like to have?
Yeah. And it's about that vibrational frequency, isn't it? And what you're open to. So there's lots of different varieties of how life can come, or how that person can come into your life, or that career. But actually, if you're not at your highest potential, it's going to be a lower vibrational version of the situation as well. So I suppose what we do is teach people how to become the highest version so that you experience all the goodness, rather than, yeah, you've got what you want, but it comes with a number of ties or hold-ups or limitations as well.
Yeah, I like this. I don't know what you call it, anecdote or metaphor. I once read somewhere that life is like a matrix. If we visualize all these lines and we're at the bottom, like being at the bottom of the seabed, you'll attract the people who live in that lower frequency. Where if we allow ourselves to rise and raise our vibration frequency, we start ascending, leaving that lower vibration in the middle. We start attracting different kind of people who think differently, who behave differently. And then if we keep working with our vibration and frequency, we reach even a higher frequency. And then, wow, these people here think and behave so differently to the people that I used to know. So everything is frequency. Most people live down here at the lower end because, again, the consumers, they've allowed themselves to be conditioned and believe, oh, well, whatever happens in my life, that's it. I'm not going to think for myself. There's, I forget the researcher who came up with this theory that only 2% of the population actually think, 3% think they're thinking, and 95% of the population would rather die than think. So if we look at the 3% who think they're thinking, what are they actually doing? They're doing something called mental activity. They're just recycling the same old scenarios, the scary stories, negative information. Where the 2% who are thinking, they're saying to themselves, okay, that didn't work out. What can I do different? Who can I talk to? They're actually being proactive. They're taking on a daily basis inspired action. And bit by bit, they start achieving their results that they actually want. And again, it's easy to be told, only 2% of the population actually think. When we have something that seems very traumatic to ourselves, it's hard. Oh, hang on a second. I'm reacting now. I have to respond, which means I have to use my creativity. What can I think? What could I do differently? It's hard when we're dealt with something, whether it's financial or your partner just left you, you just lost your job, you've been in a car accident, because we're human emotional beings. We're not robots that can quickly say, yep, I'm going to focus on this desire now. It takes time. And that's why it's good to have people like yourself that you can guide them and work with them and make them realize, you're kind of resonating at this lower frequency. Let's get you at a higher frequency so your external world can start changing.
Yeah. That's the worst bit, isn't it? When somebody's so consumed by the things that are happening around them and feel powerless. So they're in the level of consciousness that, it's happening to them. That can be the worst thing, to try and tell someone how if you change your thoughts, it'll change. And then that's when, oh, it's okay for you, or lucky for you. I think sometimes people see where you're at currently and don't realize there was a journey to get there, and the lowest points that we've probably faced that have triggered the biggest changes. I think people sometimes can forget them low points have happened, and that's why you see in the result of where we are now.
Yeah. In life, we can never escape obstacles or ebbs and flows, ups and downs. It's part of the human condition. But what we can do is learn this information, apply it, integrate it, so it becomes a habit, a good habit. And that way we learn to navigate through the so-called obstacle, negative situation, as it were, at a faster rate than allowing ourselves to get caught up in it. And then we're just stuck in a rut, basically.
Yeah.
I remember a few years ago, I had a client. He was in IT for 25 years. He loved the job in the early days, but now he loathed going to work. He just hated it so much. He wanted to quit. And I always tell people, well, don't quit. Let's see if we can phase it out first. Because if you quit, you're going to be stressed out about the lack of money coming into your life. So I said, let's be smart about this. So I said to him, what is it you would really like to do with your life? Such a simple question. And as you probably know, many people don't even know how to answer that. They think what they do, they reflect back to you what they're not happy with, what they don't want. But that doesn't answer the question. Yeah, but what is it you would really like to do with your life? Most people, they have to take the time to think about it, because most of us don't think and focus. What is it I would like? Even though I don't have it right now, we stay stuck and complain and moan and groan. That doesn't achieve anything, as you know.
Yeah.
And so this IT person, he thought about it. It took him 2 weeks to really come up with a list of what he would love to do. He'd been studying shamanic healing. He'd studied Reiki. He was studying life coaching, astrology. So he was drawn to all these so-called spiritual things.
Yeah.
And so I said to him, I tell you what, how about if we go from full-time to part-time with your work? Would you like that? Oh, that'd be amazing. But you don't know my boss. Nobody's ever worked part-time at my company. And I said, you don't know energy. I said to him, I would like you to write a letter. And then I showed him energy principles, like working with the white light, how to energize it before he sent it off or emailed it off to his boss. Of course, he thought I was mad. So we did it all. A week before Christmas, 2 Christmases ago, his boss emailed him saying, oh, we've considered your terms and conditions. We decided for January, we will allow you to work only 3 days a week instead of full time. He emailed me. He said, oh my gosh, this is unbelievable. He was so excited. He couldn't believe it. He said, how is this possible? Anyway, by working part-time, it allowed him to start spending more time on developing what he wanted to do. And then a year after that, he was able to quit his full-time job, or part-time job now, because he started generating enough clients where he realized, I could actually make a living now doing the stuff that I like to do. So you could see it wasn't an overnight success story, as it isn't for most of us, but there were gradual steps to implement, to stay focused on, that actually led him to reach his actual desired outcome.
Yeah. And that's a good point, because I think a lot of people want that instant gratification. So I'm not happy now. Give me something that's going to shift me very, very quickly. And it can shift quick depending on your belief and the energy you're pouring into it. But then it takes that decision to keep the dedication, which is often the hard bit when the results outside take a little while to alter or change. Can be a little bit disheartening for people.
Yeah, it's a bit like exercising or learning to play an instrument. If you were my guitar student and you said to me after a few months, I don't really feel I'm improving or learning anything on the guitar. And I could say to you, okay, Rachel, are you actually practicing 5 days a week, 5 or 10 minutes every day? Oh, no, I just show up to my lesson. I wait to see what you show me. I'd say, well, no wonder you're not improving. You need to take time outside the class and spend at least 10 minutes, 5 days a week practicing. And it's like that with anything, mental practicing. Even though the mind, we cannot physically see the mind, because they say the mind is universal intelligence. Our whole body, our whole being is the mind, the universal mind, the subconscious mind. We have to use the mind and practice visualization using the imagination and focus, a bit like movie directors or people who create movies. They imagine what they want. They imagine the scene. Or painters. If you talk to any experienced painter or sculptor, they don't know what they're going to make. They're just allowing themselves to get into that flow, to feel inspired. And even if they might not finish it on that day, they go back to the next day and then they continue working on it. And then something that seems like ridiculous, bit by bit, unfolds. Wow, look at that. That's really good. And people who didn't see the person creating that art form will think it was done in 5 or 10 minutes. They don't realize how much time and discipline and focus was required to actually generate this beautiful piece of artwork.
Well, Larry, I could literally talk to you all day, but share with the listeners how to get in touch with you, how to work with you, anything you've got coming up that you want to share with them.
Well, because music and spirituality is in my blood, I just can't stop doing music or spiritual things. So even though I don't play music full time anymore, I still have a few private students I teach. So I've got a new guitar book, So You Want to Play Guitar, which will be available soon on my website, which is larrymedium.com. And for people interested in my services, whether it's having a psychic mediumship reading or learning to unfold their intuitive gifts or have maybe alignment coaching, you can find all that information on the website, larrymedium.com. And if you live in London, you'll see my name around working in what's called the spiritual churches in London.
And soon to be, you will be on stages at some point, which we've talked about. when we talked about law of attraction for yourself. So watch this space. Larry will be hitting your shows around the UK at some point on stages. I'm putting that out there for you now.
That's right.
I'm advertising your services on the podcast. So anybody listening who books venues, I have an amazing medium that could come and share an experience for you.
Well, thank you very much, Rachel. And thank you for the listeners for taking the time to listen as well.
It was so good to have you on. You've got so many different facets to what you do. We could literally talk all day, but I'm conscious it's an hour's podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. And once things move on and change again, like it all does, we're going to have you back on and share what you're up to now, because there'll be so much more to come.
That'll be fabulous. Thank you so much, Rachel.
Thanks, Larry. Talking to Larry was so much fun, and he just has so much goodness to share. So please go and check out his links. Make sure you get a copy of these ebooks that he's got coming out as well, and follow him on all the social media platforms, because he is just an absolute legend who I am lucky enough to know and have as part of my team of people around me. So please follow and see what magic he's going to be producing in the next few years, because there is so much coming Larry's way, and I can't wait for him to share more about himself. So I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Go and find him, connect with him. He's absolutely amazing. And thank you, Larry, for being on the podcast.